Thank you to Bethesda for sponsoring this video. In Doom 1993, a lone human marine was forced to shoot his way through the hordes of hell on the moons of Mars and hell itself in an attempt to return home. In Doom Eternal, we learned that he had become something more, a superweapon strengthened by the rite of the Divinity Machine, who crossed space and time to face the Dark Lord himself, a battle that restored safety from hell across the universe. Each chapter of his story unfolded decades apart, adding new layers of myth, power, and tragedy. But every time he fought, he lost something. The period between Doom 2 and Doom 2016 remained shrouded in mystery, with Doom the Dark Ages releasing later this month, a prequel to Doom 2016. It is time to look back, to see how the story evolved through each game, and how this warrior changed with it. Most importantly, we will explore where the Dark Ages fall within the timeline. How much did the story evolve through each chapter? What did the Doomslayer lose with every battle? And how did it all lead back to the Dark Ages? In this video, we explore how a mortal marine became the godlike Doomslayer, a journey where each battle was more brutal, more desperate, and more epic than the last. Our story begins somewhere around the year 1993 on the desolate surface of Mars with a space marine. During this period, the Union Aerospace Corporation had established itself as a vast, far-reaching conglomerate across several planets and moons within the solar system. Through its scattered facilities, they had found a partner who valued the isolation and secrecy that space could offer. The military was interested in interdimensional space travel, and the moons of Mars, Phobos, and Deimos provided the perfect locations to explore this in complete privacy. To the public, however, these places were dismissed as radioactive waste sites. Our Space Marine was not here by choice. It was a punishment, the result of his refusal to fire upon innocent civilians, followed by the assault of his commanding officer. The officer and his bodycast were sent to Pearl Harbor, while our Marine was ordered off-planet. His actions had revealed the kind of man he truly was, a quiet figure of conviction, someone who would stand guard over those who could not protect themselves. He had paid the price of exile so that others could live. For 3 long years, he had been separated from his wife, his child, and even his rabbit named Daisy, but he knew it had been worth it. Over the Marine's time on Mars, he and the men at the base began to hear whispers of what was happening on the moons. Stories of hidden trials, unnatural experiments, and of volunteers who had entered the facilities on Phobos and Deimos. Some had returned broken, both mentally and physically. Some had not returned at all. Until one day, his unit received a transmission from Phobos, soaked in static and panic. Something evil had come through the gateways, the computer systems had gone berserk, and they desperately needed military support. Then, Deimos disappeared from the sky completely. Upon their arrival on Phobos, his team went inside with all of the weapons, while the Marine was ordered to stay behind to hold the perimeter. Over the following hours, all he heard through the comms was gunfire, screams, bones breaking, then silence. Without a response or a way to leave the planet on his own, this lone space marine had to make a choice. Wait in the hopes that someone would return, or enter the base with just a pistol in search of survivors to help and a way off this rock. As he walked through the main entrance of the base, he heard animal-like growls as they echoed through the corridors. Before him, he saw what these growls came from. The Space Marines he had called his brothers, transformed somehow into zombie men and demonic imps not from this world. Over the following hours, the Marine scavenged weapons as he fought through waves of zombie men, imps, demons, and specters, and as he used the UAC's teleporters, he fought for survival across not only Phobos, but also Deimos and then Hell. It was clear to him that the Union Aerospace Corporation's experiment had broken through into another dimension entirely. The Space Marine's will to survive was so strong that he refused to be taken out by these entities. He had failed to save the personnel of this facility, but he could save himself. He took down Barons of Hell, a cyber demon, and eventually, he came face to face with the demon that had planned this invasion for not only Mars, but also Earth. The Spider Mastermind. With the last of his strength, he took out the beast, and in a moment of relief, he saw a doorway open, and as he stepped through, he found himself on Earth, but it was too late. An invasion had already begun. The Space Marine had failed to save the men in his unit, the personnel of the Phobos and Deimos facility, and the invasion of Earth. He had seemingly fought for nothing. The Marine had suffered so much already, but what was to come was so much worse, a process that would temper and harden him in the flames. The invasion had begun in his hometown, and when he reached his home, he discovered the bodies of his wife, his child, and his rabbit, Daisy. He had nothing left to fight for, yet he fought his way through a demon-infested Earth in the hopes of saving his world from an eternity in hell. Where once he fought to save a few souls in the cold reaches of space, now he fought for an entire world, a battle that had become as vast and brutal as hell itself. But resilience alone was not enough. Hatred fueled him now. Every step through the blood-soaked ruins of Earth deepened his fury, molding him into a weapon of pure vengeance. Although Hell's invasion of Earth had begun in his hometown, it had gone global. From Tokyo to Timbuktu, from Stockholm to Scranton, billions had died. Some were turned into zombies, others fled from waves of demonic hordes. To escape, what remained of humanity built spaceships to carry the survivors into space, but Earth's only spaceport had been taken over by the malevolent forces of Hell, sealed away by a force field, a field generated from an outpost of Hell that had been pulled through into Earth. With relentless fury, the Doom Marine ripped and tore his way through this demonic outpost filled with revenants, mancubi, pain elementals, archvils, arachnotrons, and so much more. His rage fueled him as he raided this place, and the demons crumbled at his feet. Eventually, with the final hit of a button, the force field came down and what remained of humanity was able to evacuate the planet. As the only human left, surrounded by cannibalistic, mutated entities, he collapsed into the dust, ready to die, content that humanity might endure. But his story was not over. From space, Earth Control beamed down a message to him, reporting that their sensors had detected that the source of this invasion was in the heart of his home city. If he, their savior, could travel there, maybe he could stop this war completely and they could return home. And so, he did. The Marines' home city was full of corruption. Corpses of the fallen littered the streets, but he clenched his teeth and plunged through it. And then he discovered a portal to hell itself. Without anything to lose, he jumped in with the hopes to close it from the other side. The place had taken everything from him, and it felt his vengeance as he tore through every demon in his path, until he finally reached the biggest one he had seen yet, the Icon of Sin. It was this creature that had used its abilities to manipulate space and time to open portals from Hell to planet Earth. It wanted only death and domination, and as long as it lived, the lesser demons around it had access to Earth. Ever defiant of death, with the foot of his rabbit attached to him. Through fire and carnage, he carved his way to the abomination's pulsing brain, the icon of sin. With a final, thundering shot, he hurled death into its core with a rocket. The beast shrieked, its convulsions ripping chasms through the bowels of hell itself. The actions of a human marine had stopped Hell's invasion and brought with it ruin. He wondered where bad folks went when they died. But for now, he had other thoughts on his mind. He had to return home, alert Earth Control that the invasion was over, and then, as a species, they had to rebuild. This man had survived the impossible, isolated from every human and taken on a beast of mythic proportions. And in doing so, he had also taken on that mantle, Earth's last avenger, and the one enemy Hell would learn to fear. But even stopping Hell once wasn't enough. As the sarcophagus opened, disoriented, the Doomslayer looked around. Whispers once carried through the deepest pits of hell that the Scourge could never be contained forever. Now the nightmare had awakened. He had no idea where he was or how much time had passed. The last thing he remembered was being sealed away after a long battle in hell. And then, just silence. For centuries he had waited, but how did he get to this point? Awakened from a sarcophagus on Mars in 2145. Since his battle with the Icon of Sin, so much had happened. He had been thrown through space and time onto a path of perpetual torment and arrived on a new world entirely. He had fought through realms, worlds, and dimensions in a dark and sinister medieval war against hell in the Dark Ages. He had been a superweapon of gods and kings and earned the title of the Doomslayer. He had shredded his enemies apart and fought alongside the legendary Night Sentinels of Argent D'Nur, but that had all come to an end. This entire epic, cinematic chapter of his story is still shrouded in mystery, but we will talk about that later. Anyway, as the Slayer explored his surroundings, having just woken up in the year 2145, he cut through the demons around that had invaded the facility and discovered he was in the Argent facility on Mars. This was familiar, but it was not his Mars or his Earth. In this version, the Union Aerospace Corporation had once again sought to explore the solar system. Earth had also struggled with an energy crisis. It was in 2095 on a geological survey of the Promethae region of Mars that the UAC found exactly what they were looking for. A potential energy source they dubbed Argent Plasma, in a narrow trench they called the Argent Fracture. What they did not tell Earth, however, was that this trench was actually a dimensional fracture, one that led to hell. To refine this plasma into energy, package it and send it to Earth, the UAC designed the Argent Tower. With a grand vision for Mars, the UAC planned to terraform the planet, and to do this, the Argent facility began construction. Over time, it expanded and tens of thousands of scientists left Earth to help in this effort. The Argent Fracture was fascinating. Around it, teams recovered artifacts from another dimension. One of these was the Helix Stone. This Hell artifact was full of markings and symbols that the UAC hoped could help them understand this realm and energy source they had stumbled upon. So, the leader of the UAC, Dr. Samuel Hayden, reached out to an old protege of his on Earth, Dr. Olivia Pierce. Dr. Pierce owed a lot to Samuel. It was because of his funding and guidance that her career had exploded, and while at first she declined his offer to move to Mars as she had no interest in the energy business, when he showed her the Helix Stone and offered her the opportunity to be the first to explore this field of science with a cutting-edge laboratory, she accepted and moved 140 million miles to start a new life on Mars. Now, this is where everything went wrong. Over time, Olivia's study, research, and insights into the Helix Stone offered invaluable information for humanity, but her prolonged exposure to a Hell artifact also had unforeseen consequences. Just months into her work, Dr. Pierce developed idiopathic scoliosis, and as a result, she spent more time alone with the artifact. Some say this happened because of her frequent proximity to a Hell artifact. Despite this setback, she continued to work from her wheelchair. When Samuel Hayden was diagnosed with stage 4 inoperable brain cancer due to his close proximity to the Argent Tower, he designed himself a robotic body to live on in. At the same time, the Argent facility's advances in experimental medicine offered Olivia a chance to walk again. The procedure was brutal, a titanium exoskeleton surgically grafted onto her body. Although the operation was a success, it left her in a constant, excruciating pain. Pierce refused pain relief, fearing it would dull her mind and compromise her work. By 2127, Olivia had worked in agony for years. That same year, humanity crossed a line it would never return from. The Argent Tower was completed, and Samuel Hayden, no longer fully human, dispatched the first Argent energy package to Earth. Later in 2136, when the Advanced Research Complex was finally completed, many fascinating projects were run. But Olivia chose to spend most of her time in her lab as she continued to decode and study the Hell artifacts procured for her. Sam noticed how Olivia had grown quiet and reclusive, working only from her office. It was as she worked that she heard the voice of someone who claimed to be a Dark Lord of Hell. Daig Rannoch sensed her weakened, pained state and corrupted nature as a result of her time with the Helix Stone. He wanted Hell to harvest the souls of Earth, but to do this, he needed Olivia's help. The Dark Lord offered her great power to become a god if she worked with him. Weakened and corrupted, she accepted. Olivia withdrew from the UAC's daily operations, isolating herself with those who shared her new purpose. In secret, they formed a cult, loyal not to Earth, but the promises of Hell. Together, they devised a way to use the Argent energy systems against Mars itself. By corrupting the facility's power grids and unleashing a massive wave, they could transform the personnel into demonic entities and open a gateway for Hell to enter. Olivia attempted to please the Dark Lord of Hell, and she was given a big task. The Dark Lord informed her that Samuel Hayden and his team were planning an expedition to Kadinga Sanctum in Hell. The Dark Lord warned her that, although Hell was stronger, there was one entity they feared, the Doomslayer. His actions throughout the Dark Ages and beyond had spread fear across demonkind. It was imperative that Sam and his expedition not discover a cursed sarcophagus that sealed away this unchained predator. But she failed, and the head of the UAC not only discovered this prison, but also brought it back to Mars. Growing suspicious of Olivia, Samuel hid the sarcophagus away. It was in 2149 that Dr. Olivia Pierce and her cult unleashed the Lazarus Wave. Hell broke through into the UAC and the personnel twisted with its energies as a demonic invasion began. This is where the events of Doom 2016 began. The Doomslayer arose from his sarcophagus and entered a new war with Hell. The Lazarus Wave had allowed Hell access to Mars. Demons flooded the facility, but they were no match for the Slayer. Guided by Samuel Hayden and the AI, Vega, the Slayer tore through every demon he saw on his journey to stop Olivia. Olivia wanted to tear a permanent portal between Mars and Hell. If destroyed with enough Argent energy, the Argent Tower could perform this abhorrent feat. So, Samuel Hayden ordered the Slayer to carefully dismantle the Argent energy cases the tower used. Instead, he smashed them. From his time on Argent D'Nur and their fight with Hell, he had learned that this energy source was forged from the torture of innocent souls. It should never have existed. Despite his actions, Olivia attempted to tear open a rift anyway and jumped into a stream of energy at the top of the Argent Tower with an Argent accumulator as the Slayer watched. It did not, however, have the impact she hoped. A portal did open, but it pulled only her and the Slayer through. She was pulled through into a region called the Well, a place of suffering for an ancient species who had been chained here by the corrupted angelic Maker. The Slayer was pulled to Kadinga Sanctum, the place he had been stored for centuries by the Hell Priests after their trap had sealed him inside of the sarcophagus. To his luck, he found a UAC teleporter that had been used to bring the expedition team back from this horrid realm. The Slayer had battled through a Mars facility before, but this was different. Between ripping and tearing through every demon he saw, he had so many other almost impossible feats to achieve. He traveled to Hell and acquired an ancient weapon, the Crucible, made a copy of Vega, and then detonated the AI's core in order to use the Argent energy that powered it to open a portal to Hell. Every battle, from a Revenant to a Hellguard to waves of imps, everything was bigger, darker, more dangerous, and he loved it. Some whispered he grew stronger with each kill. When the wave of energy from Vega's core pulled this unchained predator into Hell, he looked around and saw a familiar place. Statues of Night Sentinel stood in the distance. The architecture was similar. This place had once been a part of Argent D'Nur, but Hell had absorbed a chunk of this world during the invasion. He had fought in the medieval Dark Age against demonkind to stop this from happening, but as he moved through this twisted, demon-infested land, he realized his side had lost, fallen to the corruption of the Khan Maker and her Hell Priests. The Well was an unholy abomination. The Night Sentinel had worshipped the Wraith as gods, but the Maker had seen them only for what their power could be used for: energy. The Well also held open the fracture between the Argent facility on Mars and Hell. Guided by the spirits of Night Sentinel he had once fought with who had gathered here, the Slayer honored them and used the Crucible to release the Wraith from their suffering. In doing so, the Well collapsed. Dr. Pierce had done everything she had been ordered to do by Daig Rannoch, who claimed to be a Dark Lord, but it was not enough. He was one of 3 responsible for the Slayer's imprisonment, and because of his discovery and freedom, because Olivia had not stopped Sam Hayden from bringing the sarcophagus back to the Argent facility, this scourge of Hell had ruined their plan. He had once again stopped a Hell invasion of Mars. Rannoch had offered so much to the Doctor, but her failure to prevent the return of the Slayer was inexcusable. Yet, Olivia's role in this fight was not yet over. With a blast of power, the priest merged the scientist with an ancient evil, something the Doomslayer recognized from his first conflict with Hell, the Spider Mastermind. Though the Hell Priest hoped this evil would stop the Slayer, the Spider Mastermind was no match. With a final blast from the BFG, Olivia Pierce, now merged with the ancient horror, fell. The destruction of the Well and death of Olivia Pierce put an end to Hell's plan. Having completed the task set by him, Samuel Hayden pulled his warrior back to Mars. This once simple human marine found that he could not move, and as the cyborg moved closer, he took the Crucible from him. Sam was also not who he appeared to be, and he knew almost everything the Slayer had experienced during the Dark Ages. Without the need for this warrior, Hayden teleported him, stored away until his rage was needed once more. In just his short time on Mars, the Doomslayer understood that Hell would never stop, It had taken his family long ago. It had broken and absorbed chunks of his second home, Argent D'Nur, and had claimed the warriors he had fought with in an ancient war. What more could it take? His survival had evolved into vengeance. His vengeance had become legend. In 2163, the Doomslayer returned to Earth to play his role in another Hell invasion. After his release from Samuel Hayden's tether, he had learned who had orchestrated the Mars invasion 14 years before and knew exactly how to stop it. This would be the biggest fight he would embark on so far, a battle across different worlds and dimensions. It would also have him explore places full of memories. The Hell Priests, Daig Rannoch, Daig Nilox, and Daig Grav had once been leading figures on Argent D'Nur, but their corruption to Hell's influence had turned them into some of the Twisted Realm's strongest allies. Their leader, the Khanmaker, was furious with the Doomslayer's destruction of the Well. This place had powered not only what remained of Argent D'Nur, but also her heavenly home dimension of Erdok. With the need for a new source of energy, the Queen Maker ordered her priests to claim Earth to harvest the souls of the mortal population. It was through a dark blood ritual that a super gore nest began to form in Central Europe. Over time, they resonated powerful electromagnetic frequencies, and gates opened between dimensions. From them came swarms of demons. Within a month, the majority of Earth's population was massacred, and without the energy packets the Argent facility on Mars had once given them, none of the man-made energy-based defenses worked. The priests had begun a successful invasion, and to ensure there was no interference, they bound their lives and protected their souls within coin-like talismans. It is unclear how or when the Slayer escaped Samuel Hayden's prison, but when his story began in Doom Eternal, he had taken control of the Fortress of Doom, a spaceship of both Argenta and Maker design. He had also restored the backup of Vega to help him on his journey. To stop this Hell invasion of Earth, the Slayer had discovered that each priest had to die. These corrupted men were the reason Argent D'Nur and the legendary Night Sentinels had fallen, so he welcomed the task. All of these figures were important in the Dark Ages, but even now, memories of those battles remain scattered. It was on his Hell barge, amidst the ruins of New York, that Daig Nilox was reunited with the Slayer. He believed his soul was protected and he could not die, but his confidence dropped and fear increased when he saw the warrior holding his talisman. With a crushing grip, the Slayer put an end to this first priest's life, and their collective control over this world weakened just a little. As for Nilox, his soul was dragged to Hell and it entered the very process of torture that he has subjected countless innocent souls to. On his journey to track down the other two priests, the Doomslayer navigated worlds. He returned to the city of Exultia on Argent D'Nur, once a place synonymous with the Night Sentinel, a place that had fallen when the world had. In a cultist base, he tracked down the second priest, Daig Rannoch, and just like Nilox, his soul was dragged to Hell. The Slayer and Vega had no idea where the final priest was, but the AI had an idea. Surely Dr. Hayden would know. So they returned to Earth, and there, the Slayer learned more about what had happened in his absence. It was 13 years earlier in 2150 that the cyborg had returned to Earth carrying the Crucible, hoping to use its energy to aid the war efforts. As a natural leader, he led the fight and offered every resource available from the UAC to help evacuate the population and protect the planet. He did, however, fall in one of these battles, and his robotic body and Crucible were kept guarded by the Armored Response Coalition. His creation. The Slayer, of course, barreled through the demon-infested office buildings, streets, and eventually into the ARC to find Sam and the Crucible. It was also here that he encountered a marauder, a night sentinel who had fallen to the lure of hell's darkness and become a corrupted warrior. Back at the Fortress of Doom, Samuel told the Slayer where the Khanmaker had probably hidden away her final priest, the last seal that kept Earth in Hell's thrall. This was the holy city of Sentinel Prime on Argent d'Honneur. The only issue was getting there, but Hayden had a plan. Beneath the surface of Mars was a city once constructed by the Argenta as they expanded their civilization across worlds. The lost city of Rebirth had a portal. It was also one of the many places that had seen major conflict during the Dark Ages. As the Doomslayer stepped out of the other side of this portal and walked through the halls of Sentinel Prime, memories flooded back. It was just outside of the walls of this city he had appeared on this world, battered and bruised from his fight with the ancient evils of hell. It was here that the priests, before their corruption, had placed him in the Colosseum to fight for his life, and it was also here that he had fought side by side with the Night Sentinels when Hell had discovered this world and attacked. This world was like a tapestry of the memories of his attempts to rebuild his life after Hell had taken away his family, but it had all crumbled again because of the Khanmaker, the Hell Priests, and those who had sided with them in the Civil War. When he eventually tracked down the final priest in the Colosseum, Daig Grav, he remembered all of this and shot him without mercy. Frustrated by the Slayer's interference and destruction of the Super Gore Nest, the Khanmaker attacked the Fortress of Doom and disrupted its energy source. So, he used the crucible he had found with Hayden. The death of the final priest released Hell's hold on Earth, and in a desperate attempt to claim the world entirely before the Slayer came for her, the Khanmaker began a ritual to awaken an ancient evil, the Icon of Sin. The mere presence of this titan fractured reality, space, and time. The longer it stayed in one spot, the more damage it did. It was a devourer of worlds. If this were sent to Earth, its very presence could generate a black hole and drag the entirety of Earth into hell. He just needed another crucible to take down this titan, and Samuel knew exactly where one was. Under Hayden's guidance, the Slayer fought through another fallen Argent d'Honneur city, Taris Nabat. This place once again held many memories for the Slayer. It was here that a Maker, Sama Maker, had led him into the Chapel of Purity during a deadly hell assault. He had been placed inside the Divinity Machine and came out changed. This device was powered by the essence of the Dark Lord himself, and when he absorbed this power, a human marine of rage evolved into a god-like Slayer. With his new power, he rose into the mantle of the Doomslayer after he took down the Dreadnought, a titan of immense power, and saved what remained of the city. Since his absence, the city was populated only by demonic entities, but he needed the crucible stored here to take down the Icon of Sin that the Khanmaker planned to unleash. After he acquired the weapon, the Slayer travelled through the soul factory of Necrovol. It was a place of torment and transformation for the poor souls sent here. These were harvested into energy, and at the peak was a beam that transported this energy into the place that needed it, Urduk. This realm was home to the angelic Maker and their ultimate leader, the Father. Some viewed him as the creator of all existence, but even he had shaped history to fit his own design. Long before these events, he had vanished from Urduk. Without his sustaining energy, the Khanmaker had been forced to find another source. To her, the suffering of mortals was a necessary sacrifice for the survival of her kind. This dimension was also sealed with a sort of demonic repellent barrier. No entity from Hell could enter. Yes, the Icon of Sin was an entity of demonic origin, but the Khanmaker had found a loophole. Through a ritual, she had used the heart of a mortal to control and command the creature under her rule, not Hell's. This heart specifically had once belonged to the son of Commander Valor, another person who had betrayed the Night Sentinel. However, as this ritual began and the Icon awoke, the Doomslayer stabbed the heart, and with it broke the connection between the Khanmaker and the beast. Of its own free will, the Icon of Sin turned and entered a portal to Earth, and as a creature of Hell had awoken in Urduk, the demonic repellent seal shattered. Without the seal, the Doomslayer battled his way through demons who had entered this holy dimension as he hunted down the Khanmaker. This Marine had once defied an order from his commanding officer to fire on unarmed civilians. He had assaulted this officer instead of harming the innocent, and after all of these years, through swarms of demonic entities, a spider mastermind, an Icon of Sin in the depths of hell, a medieval war on a distant world, another Mars invasion, and now as he hunted down the Queen of Corrupted Angels, he still, in his rage, had that same quality. He wanted to protect the innocents who could not protect themselves. Every chapter of his story had evolved with bigger stakes and stronger enemies across hell, the earthly realms, and a heavenly dimension. But he still fought for the same reason, and just like every other one of his foes, the Khanmaker fell to his vengeance. With the Khanmaker and her priests dead, the Slayer jumped into a portal to Earth to deal with the Icon of Sin, and he did. This was another familiar fight, and just like he had done in Hell years before, the Doomslayer took down another Titan and gave Earth another chance. This, however, was not the end of the Slayer's story. Each chapter built upon the last. In what is currently his final conflict, he went up against the Dark Lord, a victory that not only killed what is believed to be the first evil, but also banished all demonic entities to hell forever. This man had once been a simple human, transformed into a superweapon. His story was fairly clear up until he saved Earth from Hell's attack, but between his defeat of the first Icon of Sin and his arrival on Mars, much remains shrouded in mystery. We know that, somehow, he arrived on Argent D'Nur and fought alongside the Night Sentinels during their Dark Age. We know that he and the Night Sentinels were eventually betrayed by the Hell Priests, leading to their doom in Hell. But that middle chapter, the height of the Slayer's war during the Dark Ages, has never been fully revealed. Doom the Dark Ages will finally show us what happened during this missing chapter of his life, a prequel to Doom 2016 and Eternal. It promises to expand this legendary story even further. Each game built on the last, each one grander, more epic, and more tragic and triumphant than before. In Doom Eternal, the Slayer jumped across worlds and dimensions, hunting down the corrupted Hell Priests, the Khanmaker, the Icon of Sin, and eventually the Dark Lord himself. Now, for the first time, we step into the forgotten wars of the past to witness the rise of the Doomslayer in the Dark Ages. We have only ever seen the aftermath of these events through Doom 2016 and Eternal. Now at last, we will live them, and I cannot wait to be a part of it. As for when we can experience a new chapter in this timeline, Doom the Dark Ages launches on May 15th on Xbox Series, PC, Steam, and PlayStation 5, and if you pre-order the Premium Edition, you will get early access starting May 13th. Whether you are a long-time Doom fan or completely new, this is the perfect place to jump in. Even if you are new to Doom, the Dark Ages is the perfect place to start. It is where the legend truly begins. It is a dark, brutal prequel that shows the origin of the Slayer's legend. So, prepare to stand and fight your way through a medieval war against Hell. I will see you there. This was yet another great video to explore Doom, how the story evolved and just what that poor guy went through during his multiple wars with Hell. I was also happy to re-explore this universe with a different lens. I have spoken for way too long now, and I got all of my thoughts out in the video. Anyway, that was my rambling. That was everything I wanted to say. If you enjoyed this video, then I would love you to subscribe to the channel, like the video if you liked it, dislike it if you did not, and let me know what you thought in the comments below. Finally, I would like to thank my gold tier patrons and channel members: Queen Arby, Lewis, Oren X, Drakey Phoenix, Daniel Caldrorins, 501st Clone Boy, Ruben Mendoza, Imperial Embers, Canifex, Jimsy, Average Soul, Azu, Jonas, Yellow Rodriguez, Detroit, Motzi, and Brina Lee. What did you think of this topic? Are you excited to explore the Dark Ages? And what would you like me to cover next? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks again to Bethesda for sponsoring this video. This is where our story ends. Check back soon for a new one.